This week, and honestly, for the last month, there's been so much happening with Anthropic's Claude and with OpenAI's ChatGPT. They've been releasing all these updates, all of these really interesting features. And I keep seeing this news where, you see Claude is kind of edging out OpenAI, and then all of a sudden ChatGPT has their GPT 4.0, and now it's kind of taking the lead. And then, of course, there was the whole Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is now faster and on a bunch of benchmarks better than GPT-4. So it really has left me kind of, I don't want to say confused, but I'm like, who really is the winner, right? Because sometimes these benchmarks aren't super accurate. And so like I don't always trust them at face value. I want to like actually test out the actual model and see where it's at. So this week I've been putting Claude and OpenAI through the ringer, testing them out. I kind of was just like a solid OpenAI fanboy, only used OpenAI for quite a while, but I'm like, I got to break out of that because I feel like there's some other things. So I've been testing it, and I'm today in the podcast excited to share my results, and Connor has been doing the same thing. So Connor, I guess you did our last episode kind of talking about this. What have you seen since then?
It's funny because I thought that when they dropped 3.5 Sonnet that was it. It's like, okay, this is great, but they've kept on dropping little things which have been huge, including projects, and that's their name for GPTs. We're just calling them Anthropic GPTs, which much drive them absolutely bonkers. Sort of like going into some factory and sort of like, oh, it's just like Kleenex, when in fact it's a totally
Yeah,
different brand name
yeah.
or something. But here we are. Also, Jaden, look, we are in this space. We love picking winners. Who are we kidding? We love picking winners. But to your point, you sort of go back and forth. I'm also a big OpenAI fanboy. I ask people a lot, have you guys ever heard of Claude? So I'm out on the road, I'm talking to large groups, things like that. And I say, who has used Claude? And very, very few, tiny, tiny fraction of people have even heard of this, which is funny because it's so powerful and arguably more powerful than the current OpenAI. I'm sorry, or OpenAI's current 4.0, I guess what it is. So for me, I'll just say, in case you haven't heard me say this before, I use Claude and have used Claude for very specific use cases. I use Claude when I need to imitate my voice. So for me, what that looks like is I'm a writer by background, so I actually like writing, and I put out a newsletter every Friday. The AI Mindset newsletter just talks about how to rethink all this stuff, blah blah blah. But point being, what I do with Claude, which I tried to do with ChatGPT, did not work well. With ChatGPT, what I would do is I would like either make a GPT, and GPTs, if you haven't seen them, there's sort of super personalized, customized ChatGPTs. You can say, "Hey, this is what I want this thing to be," and here's the 30-page document that you should always pull from. So the one Sam Altman did, he uploaded all of his talks to young entrepreneurs, and now you have Sam Altman bot. Hey Sam, what would you say to a young entrepreneur? Blah blah blah. And what it does is it pulls from, instead of the entire internet, it pulls from those 40 pages of Sam Altman speeches. So you have a little Sam Altman in your pocket. So extend that out to everything. So the way that I was doing it was, hey, here are my first 5 newsletters that I was, really proud of. They really kind of, they followed a framework, all that kind of stuff. And I would make it into a GPT and say, follow my tone, humor, style, and things like that, and then put it into a framework. But as we know with these things, I had to write out the rough draft of it. If you just say, "Hey, do it," it's going to create garbage. So the problem with GPT and ChatGPT is anytime it tries to do like humor or something, Jaden, you and I have talked about this before, or casual, it's like it turns into surfer guy. Hey, or
Yeah.
oh, it starts to tell like dad jokes. It's awful.
Yeah.
Claude, for some reason, is phenomenal at mimicking voice. My use case for Claude is doing things like that, imitating voice. So my newsletter, what you read, if you read my newsletter, is something that is absolutely me, sounds exactly like me, all that kind of stuff. And I will have written the first draft, but what it does is it just frames it up for me, probably puts it into an easier framework for the audience to read. Anyway, so my big obsession, Jaden, is the Claude projects. What about you? What are you sort of like when you get obsessed with Claude, when you're using it? What excites you about it?
So it's interesting you mentioned the newsletter because I've actually been testing it out for some newsletter projects. And also, by the way, for those that don't know, you absolutely have to be subscribed to Connor's newsletter. It is amazing. So like huge shout out and plug for that. We're gonna leave a link in the description. We should every week, so I'll double check that's there. But
Thank
like
you.
go and subscribe to that newsletter. That
Man,
is,
right there.
if you only were subscribed to one, this would be the one.
Just if you
So
only read
definitely,
one thing, but if you would
if
like, if
you,
you only
yeah,
literally read one thing all week.
for Connor, it's the Bible and the newsletter. Those are the only things he recommends people read.
Only 2
So
things, guys, the Gospels and the newsletter.
no, but seriously, great newsletter. I was testing it out this week for a similar use case. So I've been lacking. Anyone that has subscribed to my AI Box newsletter, you know I've been slacking on that. I'm going to publicly apologize right here. We're getting back into it. We have some amazing people that have just joined our marketing team for AI Box. We're getting ready to launch our closed alpha next week. So this is exciting times for us. We're getting things ramped back up and back on track with the newsletter. And I was like, I had this like whole prompt I used in the past to like take news articles and help convert them into snippets for this like AI newsletter that we send out. Like I have no shame. We use AI to help write the newsletter. We're essentially sharing like AI news that happens every day. We make a cool prompt that makes it like fun and interesting and whatever. But like that's what you're gonna get. The top 3 news stories, summarized, really good bite-sized pieces. Every AI newsletter does that. So this is what we're doing. In the past, I used ChatGPT, and it was good, but like as you were talking, Connor, I think I had a small epiphany about ChatGPT versus Claude, and you talked about how it does your tone and your voice a little bit better. I 100% found the same thing, and that is that I feel like ChatGPT, and I've had a hard time ever putting my finger on it because I want to say is like more professional, but it's like, but is it really professional? Because like it uses these funny words, but I'm like, but you're professional. And when you use words, you're like talking to people like they
Right,
would understand.
right,
And when I'm
right,
also
right.
thinking like, also huge shout out again. So this is just a plug Connor session. I was starting reading his book, Little Princes, this week. And amazing writing, amazing book. Highly recommend you guys all read his New York Times bestseller. Incredible book.
Wow, how about
Um,
that?
but while reading it and reading other books too, it's like books that are well written are not this like highly I think it's academic. It's
Yes.
like they're relatable, they're understandable, they're not casual like a surfer, but they're like understandable, they're digestible. And this is what you want your newsletter to be. This is what you
Yes,
want your emails to
exactly,
be. This is
exactly.
what you want all of your communication. This is prime communication. And Claude does that so much better than ChatGPT. And
Mhm.
I'm trying to figure out why is ChatGPT like that? Because it's like if you ask it for casual, it's a surfer. If you ask it for professional, it's a robot. And I realized what feels robotic, ChatGPT talks a like a study. It talks like a
Yeah.
PhD researcher. That is
That's
exactly the
such a good
problem.
po
It's
I
like
love
it's
this point, yeah.
academic. And I wonder if it's because like it's being trained by PhD researchers. And so ChatGPT all of a sudden is like, that's who it's talking like, right? And I'm like, did Anthropic have to train theirs not to be like that, or did Anthropic just not like? I'm trying to figure out what it is, and
Well,
like,
I don't even know if that explains it all, Jaden, because, like, you're absolutely right, and it's like it's just lacking a soul in some way, right? It's sort of like lacking that little piece of authentic that you're missing,
yeah,
and the big examples for me in Claude are always, I put in, like, I try to be mildly funny in the things, and Claude, whereas ChatGPT will write, like, big, clunky, kind of, like, jokey kinda things,
uh huh,
Claude, it just hits my sort of like subtle, like it or don't like it, doesn't matter. When I read it, I'm like, God, I wish I had said that. It's sort of
yeah,
subtle. So it's almost like it's exactly what you're saying. And it doesn't even have to be trained on big academic stuff. It's just missing what it sounds like to talk to Jaden. And I think ultimately that's what people want to hear. They want to hear your voice, right?
yep. So with all that being said, so there's all the praise for Claude, but I do want to say the the downside, maybe I'm not sure. I am still using ChatGPT for our newsletter because I was testing both, and the reason for it is because I went to ChatGPT and it wasn't giving me necessarily great results. It was doing the standard thing, but then I said, like, because I told it exactly bullet points of what I wanted it to do for these like news summaries. Then I said, here is a literal example. Just copy the style and tone
Yeah.
of this. So I gave it the outline of what to do and the example. And I'm finding actually that's the way I get the best results.
Yep.
Don't just give it an example and don't just give it like bullet points of what you want it to do. You
100%.
combine both of those,
100%.
and ChatGPT gave a really good response that just felt like it actually gave a better summary. So maybe it's the logical
Mm.
perspective of ChatGPT I felt was better when I gave the same thing to Claude. Claude summarized like the article in bullet points, but they were like they're much shorter bullet points. And like
Hmm.
when I read ChatGPT's and versus Claude's, ChatGPT in like a similar amount of space, like it had like two interesting things related to the story that were like juicy tidbits, and Claude just had one. And so I ended up going with ChatGPT because I felt like it was giving a little bit better context, a little bit juicier responses. And so, well, Claude, I think, has a better tone. And then there maybe I just needed to, I use the same prompt. So maybe I just needed to tweak the prompt that I was giving to Claude, like, hey, give a little bit more context, give a little bit more detail. And it, like, probably just saying that and it would have gotten there. I'm not sure. But all this to say, I actually am still using ChatGPT because it felt like in one shot, ChatGPT had just a little bit more on reasoning,
Yep.
data, interesting tidbits. It doesn't
Yep.
sound necessarily like a human, but it did give you a couple extra interesting tidbits that pulled out of the article that Claude didn't. So
Also,
for what
Jaden,
it's worth, I really do see pros and cons of both.
if this thing is important to you, like, if you're writing something that's important to you, then you have to take time. I think sometimes the mistake people make on AI is to think, hey, here it is, give it to me. And then they want to take it back, and then and they forget how much, time writing takes. They want to go from sort of walking to a flying car. There's steps in between that thing. And with Claude and with ChatGPT, you have to iterate with it, you have to work with it. But no matter what, Jaden, here's the takeaway. Here's the big public service announcement for everybody as we close out this episode. Try both. Definitely try Claude projects. The user interface is not very good yet. Hopefully, Claude, come on, Anthropic, you got to get better at that. The user interface is really terrible, but just try it. If you are creating content, ChatGPT for all your needs. But if you are creating content, especially written content, you are doing yourself a huge disservice if you are not trying Claude, because I think it is the better product at the moment.
100%. Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, if you learned anything new from our analysis of OpenAI, Claude, we really would appreciate it if you drop us a review. Connor and I are on a quest. We're so close to hitting 100 reviews.
We're
We need a
getting there,
few more
folks.
push it
We're
over the
getting there.
edge. If you haven't done it before, like today is the day. We
Yes.
would really appreciate it. We appreciate all the support you guys kicking in. We're about to hit some big milestones on the podcast. Excited to announce them all to you guys. Appreciate all the support and hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day.